Hi everyone, it's Beth from the West Dallas Public Library. Welcome to our last day in London on our Let's Go on Vacation book club. Today is episode 5 where we'll be finishing up Where is the Tower of London? All right, so remember we're picking up with the Tudors again. In chapter 11, Tudor Prisoners. One of Henry VIII's last victims was the Earl of Surrey. Surrey's enemies convinced Henry that Surrey was plotting against him. This was easy to do because all the courtiers were usually plotting and Henry was always suspicious. While Surrey was locked in the tower, he tried to escape by climbing down the chute of the garter robe. Unfortunately, the guard noticed his empty bed. After Surrey emerged, dirty and stinking from the privy, remember what that is? The toilet. He was recaptured, and a few days later, he was executed. When Henry VIII died, his 9-year-old son followed him as King Edward VI. Young Edward died a few years later. In the days after Edward's death, there was a lot of confusion about who should rule next. Henry VIII's oldest child was Mary from his first marriage. She was the obvious choice. But King Henry had said that his marriage to Mary's mother had broken a religious law. This meant that Mary could not be queen. His other daughter was Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, who was beheaded. Since Henry had said that Anne was unfaithful, people thought Elizabeth shouldn't become queen either. Edward VI was a strong believer in the new Protestant religion that was introduced to England by his father. He didn't want Mary to be queen because she was Catholic. Right before he died, he said that the person who should follow him was Lady Jane Grey. She was a cousin and her family was not Catholic. So, Jane became queen, but only for 9 days. The advisors who had been ruling for Edward, because he was a child, were in favor of Jane Grey becoming queen, at least at first. But they turned against her. Jane was accused of treason and thrown into the tower. She protested that she had never wanted to be queen. It was forced on her, but it was no use. A few months later, she became the 3rd queen to be beheaded in the tower. She was not even 17. Poor Jane. So, Mary became queen and quickly made the country Catholic again. Mary was afraid of her half-sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth believed in the new religion, and she also had a good claim to the throne. So, Mary had Elizabeth sent to the tower. People held in the tower often entered by boat through a gate in the river Thames that called the Traitor's Gate. Okay, so they would ride on the river into a gate called the Traitor's Gate. Elizabeth was angry that she was taken through this gate. She said she was not a traitor. She sat outside in the rain for a long time before she would go into the tower. Mary had Elizabeth watched very closely. She was only allowed to walk along the roof between the 2 towers, not in the garden. Her meals all had to be examined by the tower staff before she could eat them. Mary wanted to be sure no one could send Elizabeth a secret message. After a few months, Elizabeth was sent from the tower to another castle. The next time she entered the tower, it was to prepare to be crowned Queen of England. After Mary's death in 1558, she became Queen Elizabeth I, one of England's greatest rulers. So remember, the current queen today is Queen Elizabeth II. This is Queen Elizabeth I. Okay, so we're going to do a little blurb called Beefeaters. There There are special guards for the Tower of London, called, yeoman warders. I might be pronouncing that wrong. The costume they wear dates back to the Tudor period. The yeoman warders' nickname is Beefeaters. No one knows exactly why. They are responsible for performing the ceremony of keys. The tower is locked and the keys safely put away at exactly 9:53 at night. The ceremony is still performed today in the same way it has been since the 14th century. After the tower is locked, the warder meets a sentry and they say, so the sentry says, "Halt! Who goes there?" Then the chief warder says, "The keys." Sentry, "Whose keys?" Chief warder, "Queen Elizabeth II's keys," or whoever the current king or queen is. Then the sentry says, "Pass Queen Elizabeth II's keys, all is well." So they do this every night. The guards have never missed a night. During World War II, the ceremony was delayed because German bombs were falling. After the bombing stopped, the warder dusted himself off and finished the ceremony. So if you've ever seen, can you see the picture? The tall, fuzzy hats, those are the Beefeaters, I think. Okay, chapter 12, Great Escapes. Should be exciting. The tower was well guarded with strong, high stone walls and a moat. It looked like it would be impossible to escape from, but people did. John Gerard and John Arden were locked in the tower in 1597. They were waiting to be executed for plotting to make England a Catholic country again. Gerard wrote a letter to a friend outside. Part of it was written in orange juice so that the writing became invisible once it dried. His friend knew he could make the ink appear by heating the paper. Does that work with orange juice? I'm honestly not sure. I know lemon juice is invisible ink. Okay, I'll look into that. Gerard asked his guard to smuggle the letter out for him. The guard looked at the letter and saw that it didn't say anything wrong, so he agreed. The guard couldn't see the invisible orange juice writing. Clever. Gerard and Arden managed to loosen a bolt on a door leading to the roof. They climbed to the roof of the tower. Their friends were waiting in a boat on the river. The prisoners had brought a rope that they stretched down from the tower roof over the wall and to the river. Gerard and Arden had to climb down the rope. This was especially hard for Gerard because he had been tortured and his hands were injured. Even so, they both made it down and escaped. Gerard survived another 40 years and lived to be 73. An especially risky escape plan was carried out by the wife of the Earl of Nithsdale. Nithsdale had been condemned to death for his part in an uprising against King George I in 1715. His wife arranged to visit him in the tower with a group of women. One very slender woman secretly wore an extra set of clothing. In the tower, they dressed Lord Nithsdale in the extra women's clothing. They put makeup and a wig on him. There wasn't time to shave his beard off, so they painted it white. When the group of ladies left, Nithsdale was in the middle of their group. He walked with his head bowed as though he were crying, so no one could see his face. Do you think he got away with it? Lady Nithsdale, so his wife, stayed behind in the cell. She carried on a fake conversation as though her husband were still there. When she thought enough time had passed, she left the cell. She asked the guards not to disturb her husband because he was praying. Lord Nithsdale was never captured and spent the rest of his life in France. Very clever. Those guards need to count how many people go in, though, huh? Okay, chapter 13, The Tower Today. After Elizabeth I became queen, the tower was used less and less as a palace. It was still an important military site and a prison for political prisoners until the mid-1800s. Executions on Tower Hill continued to be a popular public event. In 1747, Lord Lovat was to be executed for plotting against the king. Stands were put up to seat all the people who wanted to watch. But so many people crowded onto the stands that one of them broke, killing 20 people. Lovat thought this was very funny, and he died laughing. Lovat was the very last person to be executed on Tower Hill. The tower became important again for military reasons during World War I. It was used to store gunpowder and supplies. It also served as a center for recruiting soldiers. And once again, it was a place of execution. During the war, 11 foreign spies were put to death there. However, they were not beheaded or hanged. They were shot by firing squad. During World War II, victory gardens were planted at the tower. The moat had been filled in and people used the land to grow vegetables to help feed the country. During the war, parts of the tower were destroyed by German bombs. One bomb just missed the White Tower. For a while, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's right-hand man, was held prisoner in the tower. And the very last person to be executed there was Joseph Jacobs, a German spy who was shot in 1941. The tower was no longer a fort or a palace. Another role was becoming the most important. As early as the 17th century, the tower was a popular tourist site. So many people were coming to see the menagerie that an admission fee began to be charged. But for a while, oh my goodness, for a while you could still get in free if you brought a dog or a cat to feed to the lions. By the 19th century, a ticket office had to be set up to control the crowds. Today, the tower is one of the most popular tourist sites in all of England. It attracts more than 2 million visitors a year. People come to see the crown jewels and the graffiti scratched on the walls by prisoners. Standing on Tower Green, people can see the very spot where 3 English queens were beheaded. And in the White Tower, they can touch walls that have seen almost every important event in England for over 1,000 years. And that is the end. Okay, so I'm going to look and see if there's a digital tour we can do of the Tower of London, like some of the other sites we visited, so you can see inside and get a better view of it. But that was the end of our trip for this week.